Good morning and welcome to the 105th Learn with Lorna. Wait for people to join and then we'll get cracking. So welcome to the 105th Learn with Lorna, where we're looking at women in the Caithness collections. My name is Lorna Steele-McGinn. I'm the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service. If you're new to this series, the Highland Archive Service has 4 archive centres across the Highlands of Scotland. We have the Highland Archive Centre in Inverness, Nucleus the Nuclear and Caithness Archives in Wick, Skye and Lochailsh Archive Centre in Portree, and Lochaber Archive Centre in Fort William. This series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of events. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we're very grateful for that. And particularly, I would like to say this week, if you have thought in the past about donating and haven't got round to it, if you would like to buy family history vouchers, please consider doing so this weekend, because this weekend we're taking part in the Highland Action for Ukraine weekend. Saturday and Sunday, all takings of High Life Highland will be donated to the Disaster Emergency Committee Fund for Ukraine. So if you would like to donate towards the work of the service, if you'd like to purchase family history vouchers, anything like that off our website, please consider doing so this weekend, when the profits will not come to us, but will go to those suffering in Ukraine. So welcome to the last episode of March, the last in our series of Learn with Lorna's, looking specifically at the women in the Highland Archive Service collections. It's been a really great set for us. I hope you've enjoyed it, both in Learn with Lorna, but also just in our general posts across all 4 pages. It's been really fascinating seeing some of the stories that we've uncovered about the women in our collections. So I hope you've enjoyed it. This week, for our final one, we're looking at the women in the Caithness collections. And this is another episode that I've had help from my colleagues on. And this one particularly is fab because all of the women in Nucleus, the Caithness archives, have selected particular women to focus on. So I'll be looking at subjects chosen by Jennifer, by Valerie, Belinda, and Anne. So I might run over a little bit because I'm highlighting so many different stories chosen by all the women in the Nucleus archives. But I couldn't talk about Caithness and women without starting with a look at the herring girls. Now, the herring season in Wick, which of course I've referred to several times through the years, usually ran from June to August, and the herring gutters spent about 12 weeks in the town before following the herring shoals further south. And many of the herring girls came from the Hebrides. They were aged from around 15 upwards, and they were recruited in crews by travelling agents of curing companies. And they were paid an engagement fee, usually about 10 shillings, to tie them to one particular company for the herring season. And islanders, as I say, there was many came from the Hebrides, and they would often have to work like this in order to earn enough to sustain the croft for the rest of the year. Their possessions were packed into boats, which were then into chests, which were then taken by boat to Wick. But the women weren't taken like that because it was thought to be bad luck to have the women on board ship. When they arrived in Caithness, they often stayed in dormitories above the yard, or they lodged with local families while they were there for that herring season. And the herring girls' work was to gut the freshly caught fish in one slice. On average, apparently, they could gut around 40 fish per minute, and those who could do faster were known as the first-class women. Cuts were very common. It was a hard work, and cuts were very common, and they used to wrap strips of fabric around their hands to try and prevent getting cut while they were cutting the herring. But of course, they spent their day with their hands in salt. So I'm sure you can imagine what that was like. Not easy work, heavy duty work, long hours, hard on the body. Now, after the gutters, the herring girls had done their part, the packer would arrange the herring into rosettes, sprinkling salt in between each layer. So each crew would consist of gutters and a packer. These barrels were left for about 10 to 12 days and then drained and sealed. And the packers earned a little bit more, but it depended entirely on how many finished barrels they had done. So these women working in Wick and in other shipping towns, in other herring towns and ports, were an absolutely crucial part of that local economy. And sometimes we can take the general, like that, down to the particular. So if we use the papers of Donald Waters, who was a fish curer in Wick, part of the Wick Society collection, which we're in the process of cataloguing. I say we, I am not in the process of cataloguing because I'm not there, but the staff at Nucleus are. And we're going to use some of the papers of that Wick Society collection, the papers of Donald Waters, to find out a bit more about one particular herring girl, Peggy MacLeod of 5 Dalemore, Stornoway, Isle of Lewis, who worked as a packer. This collection gives a bit more individual detail about what the work was like in the 1930s. So this is really comparatively recently. And it shows that in 1 week, each woman tended to work on average 83.5 hours, a 12-hour day, 7 days a week. It's funny, when I was at the hairdresser's the other day and I was talking to the hairdresser about this, because that's what I do, tell everybody about my job all the time. And I was telling the hairdresser about this, and she was just like, that's absolutely illegal. It's absolutely illegal now, but so common for people in the past to just work and work and work. Now, Peggy was one of these who followed the fish, and there's evidence of her working in Wick, June to August, and then following the fish down to Gorleston near Great Yarmouth in Norfolk from about October to December. And the collection includes evidence of the way that the contract negotiations were completed. And here's 3 extracts where we can hear a little bit more about Peggy MacLeod and how she formed that contract to work in the herring. This is a letter from the 3rd of February 1934. Dear Sir, would you kindly let us know by return whether we can depend on you for the summer season or not, as we are anxious to know by now, so please let us know by return. So she's writing to the fish curer that she usually worked with to say, do I still have a job with you? If not, I need to start looking with somebody else. And then on the 9th of May, so a few months later the same year, Dear Sir, we hear that some curers are fixing up the girls now, so I do hope that things are looking brighter towards the fishing. I wonder, could you have a place for another crew besides our own, as my sister's crew are in Glasgow at service since Yarmouth time. They stopped in Glasgow on their way from Yarmouth and are now wishing to go back to Wick for the summer season. Will you kindly let us know by return whether you'll be able to take them on or not if there is enough fishing? I hope things will brighten up, as everybody really needs it. However, let us all hope for the best. And then finally, one written in 1936, so 2 years later. Dear Sir, in answer to your letter of the 17th of May, I may tell you that we are depending on you for Wick, as we didn't engage with anyone else, although we've had a few letters from curers. We've had one from James Sinclair, fish merchant and curer in Wick, asking for several crews, so I could not get any crews as they're all engaged. Seeing as you asked us about Wick when we were in Gorleston, we were not to engage with anyone else until we heard from you. Will everything be all right on the terms arranged? So what I found striking about that as I was reading it was really the extent to which those people travelled from the Western Isles to Wick, to Yarmouth, to Glasgow, that it's a hugely transient life, an itinerant life of following the fish wherever they went. And as I said, a very hard, hard life. So as I said, I couldn't open a session on women in Caithness without touching on the herring girls. But next I wanted to look at another woman who lived an itinerant lifestyle, but moving from one place to another for work, but this time for a completely different reason, a completely different sort of work. And this is a lady with the fabulous name Flo Dixie. And Flo Dixie was a comedian, a singer, and a male impersonator. And this is Valerie's choice of women to look at in the Caithness collections. And so I wanted to start by reading Val's description of why she became interested in Flo Dixie and wanted to focus on her. So this is Valerie's words. I came across the name Flo Dixie while researching for the Sinclair Mackay Mr. Football Learn with Lorna. Her name came up so often in the minutes as she supported fundraising drives for local sporting causes. Her name alone intrigued me, so I did some digging to see if I could find out more. Through searching for her name in old newspapers, I was able to find out that as early as 1906 she was performing in Aberdeen, and this is how the newspaper extract read. Aberdeen Trades Concert. The usual large audience assembled in the Trades Hall on Saturday night, when another of the popular trades concerts took place. An innovation was made entrusting the humorous part of the proceedings to a lady. Miss Flo Dixie, however, quite justified the departure, and her reception was most hearty. She is a charming comedienne and thoroughly deserved the hearty applause accorded her. That was in 1906. So interesting there that we've made a huge risk and innovation by asking a woman to be funny, but then saying that she absolutely justified that decision. Val goes on to say, so Flo Dixie performed in and around Aberdeen as a charming comedienne, singer, and dancer. She made her first performance in Wick in 1908 in a concert billed as the popular comedienne. By September 1908, she was billed as the renowned comedienne and male impersonator, a clever, artistic little lady who has always got a pleasant surprise in store for everybody, the second Vesta Tilley, and Vesta Tilley was a very famous male impersonator. During the First World War, Flo Dixie impersonated a military officer and a young man about town. In 1915, she was billed the Scottish Vesta Tilley. It's really interesting, and when we're finished this, don't go now, stay with me now, but when we're finished this, do go and have a look for her. If you type her name Flo Dixie in, you will see pictures of her. She looks strikingly, I think, like Radar out of MASH when she's in her military uniform. And from the 1850s onwards, it was a very common thing that women would act as male impersonators in Victorian music halls. So they would put on men's clothes and perform dances and songs and monologues in character. And the music halls were very, very popular from about the mid-1800s, and I've talked a little bit about that when we did Cinema and Theatre Week. But they were popular from the mid-1800s through to about the 1920s. Lots of alcohol, apparently lots more than in pubs or saloons or taverns. Singing, dancing, parody, and criticism of morality, of politics, of people in authority to some extent. So again, in a different way, utterly different way from the Herring Girls, this was another difficult job. They were treated fairly badly often, and they were often on the receipt of abuse and criticism themselves, the performers. So again, a life of traveling for not a lot of money, but as I say, for a totally different reason. So let's pick up Val's notes in 1923 with Flo Dixie. In February 1923, she organised a variety concert in the Rifle Hall in Wick, which was a great success. She continued to tour the whole country with her act, but by October 1923, Wick Town Council had granted a cinematograph and music hall licence for the Breadalbane Hall to Miss Flo Dixie. She became the proprietress of La Scala Picture House and the Music Hall in Breadalbane Hall in Wick from 1923 to 1925. And this was a part of Wick that was built as part of Thomas Telford's development as part of the British Fisheries project. So again, that constant link to the coast and the fish. The Kinematograph Weekly of the 1st of November 1923 reported the following. Flo Dixie has taken over the old hall at Wick, which she has now reopened under the name La Scala. The interior has been redecorated with Eastern effects, and everything has been made as artistic and alluring as possible. It is Miss Dixie's intention to run popular cinema and variety programmes. By December 1923, Flo Dixie was training 40 local children to perform in a pantomime. It was performed in January of 1924, and an advertisement for it read, "A grand children's review, tidbits of variety by 40 local children, personally produced under the direction of Miss Flo Dixie in 5 beautiful scenes, gorgeous dresses, special lighting effects, speciality dances." And it says everything connected with this colossal production has been provided locally. So Flo Dixie obviously brought a huge variety of entertainment to Caithness, both with her own act and with enabling others to perform as well. She was a great supporter of good causes in the town, regularly held fundraisers in her premises for the Harmsworth Park Improvements Committee, which we spoke about in the Mr. Football Week. She also supported a variety of other causes, putting on fundraising concerts with musical entertainment where she herself would often do a comedy turn. When she left Wick, the public put on a grand variety concert in her honour. In the interval, tribute was paid to her, which said Miss Dixie was a young lady who has no equal, far less a superior, in her philanthropic work on behalf of the community of Wick. She had given from her own pocket to causes including Wick Soup Kitchen, the Lifeboat Institution, Harmsworth Park Committee, Victoria Cricket Club, the Pipe Band, Edinburgh Royal Infirmary, Thistle Football Club, Bignell Hospital, and had bought the Christmas treats for the children. And through her whole time in Wick, she spent time with the children of the town, giving them performing abilities, giving them lessons in dance and singing. And she continued after she left Wick to tour the UK with her male impersonation act. Flo Dixie passed away on the 5th of June 1985 at the age of 95, and her death notice in the Aberdeen Press and Journal gave her real name of Miss Helen MacDonald. But her name lives on in Caithness as the Flo Dixie Cup is awarded every year at the Caithness Music Festival to the best school choir. The cup was gifted by her in 1924 at the first Wick Music Festival. So a totally different person from the previous one, and a totally different person from the story we're coming on to next. Flo Dixie left a legacy. Her name lives on, and she played a really important role not only in Caithness society but also across the country in her lifetime. But of course, most people probably don't have that luxury. Most people don't live a public life. Most people don't look back at a public legacy that they have left. And so many of our ancestors will have lived a life which left little or no record. Not to say they will have had no legacy, they will have had children, they will have had work, but often they don't leave much record because sometimes they would only interact with officialdom really at times of struggle or times of difficulty. And Jennifer at Nucleus has chosen to look at a moment in the life of a woman called Emma Levac, a moment where hardship brought her into contact with the poor relief system. So we've gone from the stages and the singing and dancing of Flo Dixie to a moment of crisis in the next life that we're going to look at. And these documents, again, are from the Wick Society collection, the Poorhouse Records, which are being catalogued currently. This is the story of Emma Levac. Now, I'm saying Levac. It may be Levac. I'm not sure on the pronunciation, so please forgive me if that is your surname and I'm pronouncing it wrong. Okay, it was Emma's sister, Bessie, who applied for help to the Latheron Parish Council. We have a lot of poor relief records across the service. We deal a lot with these stories of families in a moment of crisis. But this particular case is unusual and complicated, as a letter in this collection shows. It's quite a long letter. I'm going to read it all. And I will also warn you, I find it quite a hard letter. I find it quite certainly very judgmental and opinionated, quite a hard one to read, and I'd imagine quite a hard one to hear. So this is a letter dated January 1911, Parish of Latheron, case of the Levac family. Sir, I beg to report that I have inquired into this distressing and in some respects deplorable case. At the time of my visit, there were living in this house Mrs. Levac, her son, her daughter Bessie, her daughter Emma, with her 3 illegitimate children, and 3 other illegitimate children belonging to 3 other daughters who were out at service. That is, there are 10 persons altogether. James, the husband, was away working at Wick. As regards the provision of housing, Mr. Georgeson, I understand, is now prepared to allow the family to occupy another house situated a short distance away, but presently standing empty and in a state of disrepair. The inspector informs me that his parish council are willing to make or assist in making this house habitable, and I would strongly advise them to do so without delay, as the family are meantime destitute of one of the necessities of life, viz., lodging. So he's saying, they have nowhere to live. From one cause or another, the various members of this family may reasonably, I think, be held to be disabled, and thus to fulfil the second condition of relief. But if there were even a doubt on this point, the parish council should nevertheless intervene on the grounds of humanity. So they have to meet a certain number of requirements in order to be given assistance. And he's saying some of them are disabled, so they meet it through that. But even if they weren't, you should intervene on the grounds of humanity. Indeed, the circumstances of the case are parallel with others in which the board have advised parish councils not to adhere too rigidly to the letter of the law, but to grant such relief as may be required. So, never mind too much about the detail. These people need some help. Let's give them some help. As regards the provision of maintenance, the question is a little more complicated. The only member of the family who applies for relief is the lame daughter, Bessie, but there is little doubt that the whole family, especially the children, are suffering from lack of proper food. The children are dirty and badly or insufficiently clothed. To grant outdoor relief to a family with such a record for illegitimacy would, in my opinion, be contrary to all that makes for good administration of the poor law. It is true that the applicant, Bessie, has not had an illegitimate child, and consequently the rule against giving outdoor relief to women with young illegitimate children does not apply in her case. So they're saying, normally we wouldn't help people who have had illegitimate children, I assume, because they are looking at that as you are your lack of ability to work and earn money is your own choice. So they say, but we do have to do something. But if we give money to Bessie, it says it would undoubtedly be shared by other members of the family, with the result that she would be deprived by the great part of the maintenance intended for her. The children, as far as they participated in the relief, would benefit, but it would, I think, be to their misfortune if they were allowed to grow up amid their present surroundings, under the guardianship of persons of weak intellect and low moral character. As I say, there's a lot in there that's difficult, and a lot in there that's still an issue when people are, working out where's the best place for a child to be. An endeavour should be made to have the children removed from their present guardians and placed in a house or houses in which they would have a chance of becoming decent, self-respecting citizens. At the present time, the children are unquestionably being neglected, and the opportunity should therefore be seized of instituting proceedings with a review to their removal. It says that the Inspector of Poor and the General Superintendent have advised Emma to go to the poorhouse with her 3 illegitimate children, and I warned her that she would be prosecuted for neglect if she refused to go. She consented, and arrangement was made for her immediate removal to the poorhouse. It goes on to say, regarding the lame daughter, I agree with the inspector's proposal to send her to an institution for treatment, and it may be for training, so for work, to train her into a profession or a trade. Little difficulty would be experienced in getting her to consent to this if it were not for the contrary and pernicious influence of the mother. The mother's influence will, I fear, prevail, and it will therefore be necessary to deal with the case in another manner. There's a summing up at the end that says, I recommend that the parish council should immediately repair that empty house and move them into it, that the children should be removed to more suitable guardians, that the daughter with the 3 illegitimate children should be put into the poorhouse, and that the lame daughter, Bessie, should be given the offer for treatment and the ability to train. And letters show that Emma did indeed agree to go into the poorhouse with her children, and the parish council did indeed look at repairing the house. And it's another uncomfortable letter to read. This is a letter of someone saying, many thanks for your update, essentially. Many thanks for your letter of the 7th. I'm delighted to hear that you have so far been successful with the case of Emma, and I hope that she may be yet induced to part with her children. But whether she does or not, there is no doubt that the action raised will have a good moral effect both on her and on others. Now, Emma and all 3 of her children entered the poorhouse in February 1911. They were listed as having as being anemic and malnourished, pale and sickly. Now, you remember there was some talk of Emma's sister Bessie being lame and in need of treatment and support. There is a very short little letter that really touched me more maybe than all the others. They tried to get Bessie into the poorhouse for medical treatment and then into being trained maybe as a domestic servant or something like that. And this is the letter that she wrote in reply. Dear Mr. Lilly, dear sir, I may let you know that I do not intend going to the poorhouse as my mother requires me. Thanking you, though, for asking me to go into an institution. Yours truly. I just found that so incredibly sad that someone would say, thank you for asking me to go into that institution. That was kind of you. Yeah. But there is good news at the end of this story, at this period of this family's life. At the end of April 1911, Emma found work in the fishing industry, which would bring her £3 to support her children. In May, she gave the poorhouse her starting date and asked if the 2 older children could remain in the poorhouse for a couple of days while she took the infant to her mother. Emma and the youngest child then left on the 8th of May, and the 2 older children followed on the 10th of May. So Emma found work, the children were returned to her, and the family was reunited. And the only other reference that we have to this family so far, as Jennifer said, so far, is from November 1911, when a letter details the fact that extensive repairs to that house were indeed undertaken, including the traditional rush reed thatch and the use of whitewash and divots of turf to insulate the roof. So very traditional repair to a house. And I'm aware that's a very, very short, a very brief look and a very sad look into one family story, but sometimes that's all we have. Sometimes we only see a snippet of a life as they come into contact with an organisation or an authority. And that I just thought was an interesting example, because there's so many women involved in that story. There's the mother, the 2 daughters, the illegitimate children, a very female heavy house in a moment of crisis. So sometimes we have just that very small amount of a snippet of somebody's life. Sometimes we have a huge amount of information, as we do in the next case that we're going to look at. This is a woman that some of you may well remember. If you're watching from Caithness, and I know some people said they were, then you may well remember a lady who was born as Margaret or Peggy Banks and became Peggy Barrett. And this is someone that Belinda chose to focus on. And I said I would run over, and I definitely will, and I'm not even going to apologise, because there's so many interesting stories this week. This is a story that Belinda found in the deposited collection at Nucleus P898, the Barrett family collection. This was deposited in 2018 with us and is full of information about the family and the interaction of that family with local Caithness society. Now, Peggy Banks was the second of 4 siblings. She was born in Wick on the 3rd of April 1916. In World War II, Wick, of course, was a busy base with servicemen. We've spoken before about the impact of the conflict on Wick. And it was at this time that Peggy, who would have been in her 20s, met Desmond Henry Amos Barrett, Harry, who was stationed at Wick Aerodrome. And I thought we needed to do this one next because the story of Emma and Bessie was so sad. This story of Peggy is full of fun. Peggy and Harry met at a servicemen's dance, and their first date was sledging on Harry's 21st birthday. Harry apparently waited in the snow for over an hour for her to finish something else that she was doing. But he wasn't the only one waiting because she had set up 2 dates. She'd also set up a date with someone else and had forgotten to cancel it. So these poor 2 men both stood in the howling snow and wind waiting for a date with the same lady. Harry was absolutely soaked by the time Peggy came out, and so she took him to her house to meet her family and to dry out. And that was when he revealed that it was actually his 21st birthday. They had a whirlwind romance. They were together for 2 weeks before he proposed by post. Within 10 weeks of meeting, they were married. It was the first marriage of a local girl and a serviceman, and so hundreds of people came out to watch before they went away on their 3-day honeymoon. Now, I may be putting words in your mouth, but you might think 2 weeks is not long enough to test a relationship. I'm fairly sure my parents would have had something to say if I had decided to be married within 2 weeks of meeting somebody. But the couple went on to remain married for the next 66 years. They travelled with Harry's postings, but returned in May in Caithness when their daughter was 3 years old. Harry served as the Queen Mother's first policeman in May, going on to become the Chief Inspector of Police in Caithness Constabulary. Peggy worked for the Foreign Office, and on her return to Caithness was a Sunday school teacher, Thurso Town Councillor, and Caithness County Councillor. Like Tooney, who we spoke about last week in the Skye and Lochalsh collections, Peggy was active in many charitable organisations, including the WRVS and the Thurso Townswomen's Guild. To give a bit of context for that, in December 1930, an advert had appeared in the Caithness Courier suggesting the formation of a non-political, non-denominational organisation for women to try and do in the town what the Rural Women's Institute was doing in the country. 32 women attended that first meeting, and that led to the long story of the Thurso Townswomen's Guild. The Townswomen's Guild contributed to a huge number of community projects, from ambulance provision to the creation of ladies' toilets, things that we take for granted now, but that's a whole subject in itself. Now, during World War II, as might be expected, this particular group of women supported the troops passing through Caithness, Scrabster, of course, being a major port, and they made clothing and food for the troops. Peggy Barrett, as she was then, took on the role of the chairwoman of the Guild in the 1960s, at the same time as she served on the Thurso Town Council. And both Harry and Peggy clearly contributed a huge amount to the Caithness community in their long marriage, during both wartime and peacetime, serving in the military, in the police, in the Foreign Office, on local guilds, local authority organisations, local councils. A huge amount of contribution to a local area. And as I said, I'm sure some of you will remember them. Harry died in 2006 and Peggy in 2013, but their legacy lives on through that collection and also in people's memories. Now, finally, in our trip through time and through Caithness, we're finishing right up to date with the choice of Anne. This is P960, a deposited collection relating to Stack's Bistro. This one Anne included for a number of reasons, but I was keen to talk about this as well because this illustrates the fact that we actively collect the present for the future, and I'll come back to that shortly. This is a collection which was only created and accessioned into our collections in 2021. So very recently made and very recently brought into our collections. It's a very small collection of items that have been collected by the mother and daughter owners and founders of Stack's Bistro in John O'Groats. And they collected these items during the pandemic. A 5-metre paper chain with each link detailing the feelings of customers on their return to the deli. So the fact that they were allowed to come back in to a local business and sit and talk and eat together. How did customers feel about that? They wrote it on a link on a paper chain, and that was deposited with us. Sheets of thoughts about the impact of the COVID pandemic and posters detailing the changes to the government guidance that impacted the running of the business during the pandemic. Now, to accompany these, Anne interviewed the mother and daughter team behind Stack's, Rebecca and Teresa Weimer. And the two women told Anne that they had started their business 6 years ago for a variety of reasons. They could see the potential in John O'Groats, which was at that point underdeveloped, that they wanted to bring a wider choice of menu that was still locally produced. They also acknowledged, which I enjoyed, that they weren't great employees, and so they would rather be in charge. They had worked previously in high-pressured, sexist environments and had found that very difficult. They wanted to prove that they could create and dictate an environment that could be a positive working environment for them and for those who worked for them. They wanted to be supportive of various causes, particularly women's causes, such as Endometritis Aware and Caithness and Sutherland Women's Aid and the Ask for Angela campaign. And they're now involved in raising money and resources for Ukraine. And as with so many businesses, COVID hit hard. So turnover is reduced. Innovation and diversification is forced, which is a great thing, but it's under conditions that you wouldn't want it to be, that you're innovating and developing. But Stack's continued through this, and Rebecca and Teresa were keen to point out the continuing redevelopment of John O'Groats and that the future looks bright for the area. They've also said that they have proved that mothers and daughters can work together. And it's lovely that we've got some items that prove the impact of the COVID pandemic on a local business. And then that interview that Anne did with them of, what do we want to have in that collection for the future? Let's chat to the people running businesses. Let's record that information and add it to our collections. And so if you have records, if you have diaries or business records or anything else that details the last 2 years of the pandemic, please consider giving them into your local archive centre so that in the future we can see the extent of the impact of this time on our families, on our businesses. It seems such a long time ago. I asked people 2 years ago, over 2 years ago, to keep diaries of your experiences during the pandemic. If you did that, please now contact us with a view to handing those over if you're still willing to do so. I hope you've enjoyed that. As I say, I'm aware that I've run 10 minutes over, but I hope you've enjoyed that, from the working environment of the Herring Girls to the tragedy of Emma and the Poor House, Flo Dixie's performance, the current businesses operating in Caithness and supporting women and women's causes. I hope you have enjoyed that. Next week, we'll be moving on to a new month and a new theme. New theme will be on the move. So we'll be looking at things to do with transport, travel, people moving for work and for other reasons. And I'll be starting with the crossing of the Three Firths, including the construction of the Keswick Bridge, which marks its 40th anniversary this year. It will be pre-recorded because I will be in HMP Inverness speaking to prisoners there about some of our collections. So it'll be pre-recorded, but as always, I'll pick up your comments afterwards. A reminder that this series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. That High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of talks. But if you're able to donate, please, as I said at the beginning, please consider donating via our website this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, making a purchase on our website or donating, because this weekend that money will go to support the Disasters Emergency Committee and the people suffering in Ukraine. So we would be very, very grateful if you could contribute to that this weekend. Many thanks again, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.